Hello and welcome to the NASCAR News Zone, the show where we take you through all the biggest stories in the world of stock car racing ahead of the Chicago street race this weekend. This week, Denny Hamlin is looking at potential new options for 23XI Racing's drivers next year. Hamlin has also taken responsibility for the big wreck in Atlanta last week, and Daniel Suarez will leave Trackhouse Racing next year. It has been confirmed, but where does Suarez go from here? All that and a whole lot more is coming from today's shows, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, skip to the timestamps in the description below to see the story that you are most interested in. And without further delay, let's dive in. We've got the Chicago street race on this weekend in NASCAR, potentially the last ever NASCAR street race around Chicago. There's rumours about it potentially being replaced by San Diego next season. Although at the time of recording, that is yet to be confirmed. But 2 years ago, around the first Chicago street race in 2023, we saw an incredible Cup Series debut for a certain Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG has been competitive here over the last 2 years, of course, winning in 2023. 2024, though, ended rather in tears for him, unfortunately, but he was really competitive, and he's kind of forged himself a career in NASCAR as being someone who's really good around road courses and street circuits. He managed to get his second NASCAR Cup Series win, of course, around the Mexico City round earlier in the season, and I reckon he's going to be feeling pretty confident going into the race this season. However, SVG has been reflecting on that emotional day, that incredible debut in Illinois' biggest city. So let's have a look at what he said here, guys. I've got the full story with all the quotes right here as always. When asked about the 2-year anniversary of his first win in the NASCAR Cup Series, he said, and I quote, "It doesn't feel like it's been 2 years, but so much has happened since then. Yeah, amazing. We had a really strong car there last year too, and had the potential to win it again. I'm looking forward to getting back there. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this track, so it's a pretty cool and special place." Of course, SVG these days is full-time in the Cup Series, but the fact is, if he didn't win that race on debut, it's entirely possible that he may have not got a full-time contract for this year and still be kind of a part-time driver like he was in 23 and 24. It's impressive enough that this was his first start in the NASCAR Cup Series, but I believe he'd never started in the Xfinity Series either, which he was a regular in 2024. I remember he had a really good win around Sonoma as well last season. And SVG has said that moving to the United States and going full-time into stock cars has really changed his life around completely, doing a 180-degree spin effectively. And unsurprisingly, SVG has been very complimentary about the layout in Chicago, which has been a very controversial topic among NASCAR fans for sure. Former drivers and a lot of fans saying that it's not true NASCAR, it's not the NASCAR they grew up with and love. But SVG had this to say on the layout, the track layout in Chicago. He said, quote, "Turn 1 and turn 5 face each other. You're in the fastest part of the track and there's a concrete wall in front of you. It's great. It's so much risk versus reward. I think it's one of the coolest things, but it's difficult when you get it wrong. I think for a street track, NASCAR has done very well for their first go." And it very much was a perfect storm for him effectively in 2023, not only because, of course, this was his first start on a street circuit, something he's much more experienced at, but also the fact it was in the wet as well, which a lot of NASCAR drivers are very inexperienced in as well, so that may well have helped him. Of course, it was wet in Mexico when he managed to get that second victory as well a few weeks back. But for those probably thinking, well, he's raced in V8 supercars over in Australia before, sure, that's good experience for him. And in a sense, maybe it was the fact it's actually sports cars, but these NASCAR Cup Series cars are markedly different, which he explained. He said, and I quote, "The weight of the car is very different. It's heavier in NASCAR. The way the car corners is different. The downforce is over the top instead of underneath. So the way it drives is very low to the ground and stiff, whereas supercars were high and rolled around. So they look similar on paper, but they are way, way different. They are close, but they are also not close." But part of his decision to move to NASCAR may well have been down to the fact he's not a fan of the current regulations in that series. He said, quote, "The current version of the Australian supercar is a piece of which is one of the reasons why I left. But the old supercar was awesome. It was a really cool car, so I don't miss the supercar." Fair enough. Not mincing his words there. So there you go, guys. Can SVG get a second win of the season, a second win around Chicago for the potential swan song of the event? Your thoughts are appreciated in the comments below. He is absolutely going to be in the mix for that, no doubt. There's always that stereotype that racing drivers never admit responsibility and always either blame another competitor, their car or their team for their misfortunes. But when you're a team owner, that does put you in a bit of a precarious position, but of course you can always blame the opposition. However, Denny Hamlin, the co-owner of 23XI Racing, pretty much admitted blame for the incident that happened at Atlanta that caught up a bunch of cars, 23 to be exact, over half of the field. It was a massive wreck. I mean, we had a big one before that in stage 1, but the one in stage 2 was absolutely massive. Hamlin was blamed widely for the incident, and he has basically admitted responsibility now, saying, quote, "Maybe it's on me," end quote. It absolutely was Hamlin, but let me just go into some of the details about this, guys. Atlanta at the Quaker State 400 absolutely produced a massive pile-up, and it was started by Denny Hamlin. So Hamlin made these remarks on the Actions Detrimental podcast, saying, and I quote, "Listen, I watched the replay a few times. Maybe it was my fault. Because I want to be fair and honest on this podcast, and I'm looking at it, and I thought at the very beginning, I was like, what the hell, somebody in front of me zigged and zagged, and I said this on my interview. These guys were tail wagging, and I was just pushing as I normally do," end quote. Now, drafting in NASCAR is crucial, especially around the super speedways. You want to be as close to the front as possible, not at the actual front. You want to be able to save as much fuel by drafting as much as you can, but also still being competitive, and importantly, crucially, not being cut off from that leading group. And that's what Hamlin was trying to do, but obviously it didn't quite work out. A little misalignment here, a little misjudgment there, it can be disastrous, and that very much was the case for Atlanta at the weekend. And he explained all the thinking and the lead up to this incident on the podcast as well. He went on to say, "Spotter tells me they're locked on the front row. That means I'm able to continue to push. Everything is kind of good to go. And yeah, I was the end of the snake tail that lost control, but it looked like I knocked the 42 kind of out of control. Maybe it's on me." But the consequences for Hamlin were pretty big. He's lost out on $1 million, arguably because of it. He went into the in-season challenge as the top seed, but unfortunately, because he retired from the race and his opponent for the night, Ty Dillon, managed to finish up in P8, he of course advances to the next round, and Hamlin does not. So unfortunately for him, he lost out big time, and a lot of people lost out big time as well. A very dramatic race at Atlanta, but also one where we had a very much a reduced field at the end of the race. But yeah, guys, there you go. Hamlin's fault? It looked like it to me, to be honest with you, on the replays. I must admit, he was the guy who definitely was the first one to instigate all that. Denny Hamlin has been coming out in the media and saying drivers for his 23XI Racing team need to be winning more races. He said, and I quote, "All of our drivers should win." End quote. Now, Hamlin has, of course, won the joint most races so far in 2025 at 3, but Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, and Riley Hurst, and none of those guys have managed to get any victories so far this season. Now, Hurst, of course, this is not really a message for him, I don't think, because, of course, he's still a rookie, still an inexperienced driver, and he's still finding his feet in NASCAR, but Reddick and Wallace are much more experienced. So this is a very thinly veiled kind of like, you know, you need to get your act together here for his other two drivers. Of course, Hamlin is much more than just a driver. He's also a co-owner of the team alongside Michael Jordan. So he very much has a vested interest in trying to get as many of his men into the playoffs in the postseason as possible. But things haven't really gone right for Wallace and Reddick so far this season. Victory lane has eluded both of them, but of course last time out in Atlanta we saw Chase Elliott win for the first time this season, like a 44 race drought I believe he went without actually managing to win a race, but that all changed last weekend. And of course we've got Chicago coming up this week as well, so that very much can produce a big surprise. But will Wallace and Reddick, will they make the playoffs? Will they get a victory in 2024? Well, according to Hamlin, they really should be able to. There's no excuses for them not to be winning. And he's also more than hinted at the fact he might well replace Wallace or Reddick at some point in the near future. He said, that is the expectations I have of them. They need to be winning. Obviously, this is a results-based business, and if you don't over time, you consider your options. But he did play down the potential of actually replacing them next year. Hamlin went on to explain in that interview, he said, overall, I've seen enough progression, specifically from the Wallace standpoint, that I can see where this can go on. Putting himself in a playoff position year after year is good, but winning makes it better. End quote. Now, Tyler Reddick, of course, made it all the way to the championship Final Four in Phoenix last season. And he had 3 wins throughout 2024, but 25 has not been as good of a year for him so far. He's gone half the season without going down victory lane. But of course, he has the potential to do better. However, Wallace, he's not won in 3 years now, pretty much, since 2022 at Kansas. In fairness, though, he's only got 2 victories in his entire NASCAR career, the other one coming at Talladega in 2021. And in fairness, Wallace hasn't been hiding from this. He has said that the expectations have not been met so far this season. He said, and I quote, after the recent race in Atlanta, that we have expected to win at this point in the season and we have yet to do that. But it goes back to executing. And if we can just do our jobs, there's no one behind us in the points that can beat us. So we'll just continue to do that. So there we go, guys. Will Wallace or Reddick get a win in the regular season? Will they book their place in the playoffs? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Bubba Wallace is rarely a man to mince his words, and he did not hold back in Atlanta, calling out NASCAR over safety concerns linked to spotter visibility at road and street courses after what he saw in Mexico City and ahead of the upcoming Chicago race this weekend. Effectively, Wallace accused NASCAR of not doing enough to support both the drivers and also their safety as well. He said, and I quote, "This was complete like I said, never a man to mince his words." And his longtime spotter Freddie Kraft backed him up on this as well, describing the Mexico City conditions for spotters as the following. One of the spotter stands was useless, completely useless, and that was at turn 15. So you could literally see the exit to turn 15 and the entry to pit road, he added. So unless somebody spun out and was sitting there, that was the only time where you were actually going to do anything, and that was the primary location when we got there. Before going on to explain that turn 1 was, quote, even more useless than turn 15, explaining you were down on the ground looking straight at the front stretch, so you have no depth perception getting through 1, and you can see little in 2 or 3, but you were really low, so it was hard. Now, according to Kraft, the concerns of the spotters and the drivers were put to NASCAR. They wanted turns 1 and 9 to be the primary locations for spotters given their concerns. But NASCAR was not entertaining the idea. They said that we cannot put you up there for whatever reason, and didn't explain it from that. Now, a lot of people might be wondering, well, why do you need spotters around a road course? Most motorsport series that race around circuits like the Hermanos Rodriguez circuit in Mexico City, for example, Formula 1, don't have spotters, but it's different in NASCAR. And Kraft explained it in this same interview as well. He said, and I quote, "The idea is we're here for safety. I know we do a lot of up there right now, but the primary goal is safety. You got guys down there you can't see." And he's concerned about Chicago as well. He said that NASCAR have moved the primary location this year for the race from one side of the front stretch to the other. So again, we don't know what we can see, and we can't see when we get there. Basically, when it comes to locating these spotters, making locations from spotters, according to Kraft, are not involved in the decision-making process of where spotters should be located. They just put them wherever they want to. They don't even ask them. That is what he's saying, of course. I imagine NASCAR would not go along with that, but who do you believe in this situation? Let us know in the comments below. And we'll see you soon for much more content like this, guys. I mean, is this a big safety hazard? Is this a bit of hyperbole? Is this overblown? I want to hear what you have to say here, guys, because it is very important at the end of the day. Driver safety in all motorsports, and NASCAR, of course, included in that, is absolute paramount, and it should be. But is NASCAR taking unnecessary risks here? I want to hear what you have to say. The battle for ratings when it comes to NASCAR and Formula 1 right now in the United States is an interesting one for sure. Now, NASCAR is generally accepted as being the most popular motorsport in the US, but it's had a fairly troubled few years to say the least. Not least because the fact that Formula 1 nowadays is getting a lot popular. Drive to Survive, the TV series on Netflix, has ballooned the popularity of F1 over in the States, and no doubt the recent F1 movie as well will boost those numbers even more. But despite that, top of the tree when it comes to motorsport is still the NASCAR Cup Series. And that is the case even when they are not competing at the same time or even on the same day. Normally, of course, NASCAR Cup Series events and also, of course, Formula 1 Grand Prix take place on Sundays. However, this past weekend was different. We had the Austrian Grand Prix in Formula 1 on Sunday as normal, but the Quaker State 400 around the Atlanta Atlanta Motor Speedway actually took place on Saturday, so they weren't even the same in terms of being on the same day. They wouldn't have been at the same time. The Austrian Grand Prix, that would have started at probably around 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're on the west coast of the US, that'd be like 6 a.m. So that's a very difficult one there, and we'll get into that caveat very shortly. Don't worry about that. And of course, the Atlanta race, that would have been like early afternoon sort of time on the East Coast. So they wouldn't have clashed with each other at the same time, but they would have been on the same day. But despite all that, NASCAR absolutely crushed it when it came to the viewing figures compared to F1 over in the US. Let's have a look at the stats. So interesting, this was the first race that was broadcast on TNT, the first NASCAR Cup Series race, I should say, in over 10 years. The last time that happened was back in July 2014. And 1.6 viewers in total tuned in live to see the race and see Chase Elliott win his home race. It was a really entertaining race, to say the very least, but how did F1 get on the same day? Well, on average, the average viewership for the Austrian Grand Prix was around 1.1 million, 500,000 less than the NASCAR Atlanta race. And Ryan Blaney was feeling in pretty confident mood when it came to this. He was very brash in his response when he got told this news. He said, and I quote, "So we got 500k more folks tuning in. Why do people make it out to be a bad thing? We crush the parade every week. So why do we get down in the dumps by this? NASCAR is currently crushing it." End quote. So, interesting one, guys. I mean, for me, the start time definitely played a part in that, but NASCAR is and probably will be for the very foreseeable future the most popular motorsport in the US. It's not going to change anytime soon, but the fact that it was on so early on the West Coast and also pretty early on the East Coast as well, that would mean that a lot of people wouldn't tune in live to watch it. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong when it comes to that, but I know a lot of people here in the UK don't really watch things like the Chinese and the Japanese Grand Prix because they're on really early in the morning. People normally catch the highlights after the fact, and I imagine it's similar for a lot of viewers in the US. So I'd be interested to see what the highlights packages, the post-broadcasting, the on-demand kind of figures are for that. But yeah, NASCAR very much is still number one in the US when it comes to motorsport. But how long will that last? Will it last? Thoughts in the comments below are appreciated as always, guys. We were talking literally last week about how Chase Elliott, his chances of getting into the playoffs were looking good, but he needs to get a victory. And got a victory, he very much did, at his home race in Atlanta, winning for the first time in over a calendar year. Unbelievable stuff. So happy for him with that. And because of that as well, he's up into second place in the playoffs. And now, not only is he in the playoffs pretty much guaranteed, he also is going to be looking at the championship as well. And because of the big wrecks, because of the crash, particularly the one in the second stage that was instigated by Denny Hamlin, which he's now admitted blame for, which is very refreshing in motorsport to say the very least. It was very much a reduced field, and that meant that guys that normally wouldn't be at the front, such as Brad Keselowski, were challenging for the lead. And it was very dramatic going through that battle with those guys. Alex Bowman, if memory serves as well, was up there too. And yeah, an emotional one for Chase Elliott. I'm sure after not winning for so long, he was very much doubting himself, whether he could do it, whether he was going to do it in 2025, and he has done. He was pretty emotional after the checkered flag fell and spoke to the media saying, and I quote, "It was truthfully a pretty surreal moment, something I'll remember for the rest of my life. Saturday night under the lights, been a while since we won, just getting ourselves a win and advancing up on the playoff thing." End quote. This is Elliott's 20th career victory in the Cup Series, and his first in over a year since he managed to win at Texas in April 2024. And of course, for the 2020 champion, it clinches a spot in the playoffs as a result. You win and you're in. Elliott's won, he's in. And he's up to second place in the standings, only behind William Byron. And it's a top three right now in the driver's standings for Hendrick, as of course Kyle Larson is up in third place as well. Elliott has won around Atlanta before, winning here in 2022, and the Georgia native very much does enjoy this super speedway track. And something that the Georgia native no doubt enjoyed as well is the fact that the crowd were cheering his name as well. Elliott was also quick to thank Alex Bowman, who of course made things difficult for Brad Keselowski, his teammate, doing him a big favour there in the closing stages of this race to allow him to win. Bowman provide a crucial push, which is of course so key around a super speedway like that. Drafting and bump drafting is so important. If you can do it with your teammate, even better. It makes things very much less complicated when it comes to the checkered flag. And of course, he's still in the And of course, he's still in the in-season challenge as well. We've still got a few more rounds to go, but the top seed, Denny Hamlin, is out, of course, and Elliott advancing to the next round does, of course, give him a chance at winning $1 million, which even the richest NASCAR driver would not turn up the opportunity to do. And of course, it's a nice call back to his father, Bill Elliott, of course, a fantastic NASCAR driver back in the day as well. He managed to win the Winston Million back in 1985, so it'd be kind of a nice tradition to repeat that 40 years on from what his dad did. So yeah, there we go, guys. Chase Elliott, is he going to win the championship? Is he one of the favourites now of that victory? For me, he's got to get a few more. He's got to be a bit more clinical when it comes to these victories. He's been very consistent so far this season. That's reflected in the fact that he's up in second in the point standings. But for me, he needs to get a few more victories. Still plenty of time to do it. And as we saw last season, you don't have to get that many victories in the regular season. You don't have to get that many wins before the playoffs start. If you start winning in the playoffs, you're going to go straight through just like Joey Logano did. So it's not always about being the most consistent, it's being the most consistent at the right time. You really do get the feeling that if Ryan Blaney had no bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. Things are not really falling in place for him right now in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's very much bemoaned his lack of good luck after being involved in another wreck, this time in Atlanta last weekend. Indeed, the Team Penske driver was eliminated early on in the Quaker State 400 following a multi-car incident that was triggered by Christopher Bell, another guy who is not doing particularly well at the moment. Blaney qualified on the second row in third position for the start of this race, and he was running in 15th position before the huge multi-car pileup took out a bunch of drivers, including Blaney. Bell lost control of his Toyota Camry and slid down the banking, clipping Austin Dillon's number 3 Chevrolet, and Dillon had no time to react and slammed into the rear of Ryan Blaney. That spun Blaney up into the wall nose first and ended his day. Very much an innocent victim. There were plenty of those in both the wreck in that and also the wreck in stage 2 as well. Very much a race of attrition was Atlanta. If it wasn't for the red flag repair rules, we might have even had less drivers actually take the checkered flag at the conclusion of the race. Blaney spoke to the media after this crash, saying, and I quote, "I couldn't see much. They kind of started spinning and coming down. I tried to get to the apron, and by the time I got there, I kind of got blocked. This is the story of our year, just getting caught up in other people's garbage. Just when we get it going pretty good and find some momentum, we don't seem to have things go our way." End quote. Bubba Wallace, AJ Allmendinger, and Kyle Larson also got caught up in that incident, but Blaney was the only one who actually ended up retiring from the race as a result. Wallace was more scathing in his criticism of Bell, saying, and I quote, "Christopher Bell is a dumb. That's what he gets." Bubba Wallace is always not mincing his words when it comes to his remarks on the radio. But once Blaney calmed down, he took to X and posted his support for the team despite the disappointing result. He said, and I quote, "Thank you to our Team Penske teammates back at the shop for a fast race car and all our amazing partners. Wish we had more time to show what our Ford Mustang had, but there was nothing that we can do." End quote. That is the way the cookie crumbles, unfortunately, sometimes. Very much an innocent victim, but a victim nonetheless, and it's just going to make him more and more angry, stuff like that. But although he does sound considerably more calm than Bubba Wallace, who was caught up in the same crash. But yeah, like all things in NASCAR, guys, you know, it ebbs and flows. You go through hot streaks and cold streaks. I mean, Bell won 3 of the opening 4 rounds of the season, 3 in a row, of course, and now he really can't catch a break. Things can change around. I'm sure they will do for Blaney eventually. But yeah, how's he going to get on in Chicago this weekend? Of course, very difficult race for the NASCAR Cup Series drivers. I want to hear what you have to say in the comments below, guys. So the Chicago street race in NASCAR, it's very much a controversial topic. Some people love it. A lot of people hate it. Some people label this as not being true NASCAR, while others accept that to grow the sport in emerging markets and markets where traditionally NASCAR has not been as strong, to have a variety of races, whether it be oval races, road courses, street circuits, or anything else in between, you have to have races like Chicago. Now, Chicago has definitely delivered when it comes to drama, but like I said, not all NASCAR fans are a fan of it. They don't think it's proper NASCAR racing because it is, of course, not taking place on an oval. They don't class it as true NASCAR racing because it's not on an oval, where NASCAR traditionally does take place, and indeed most of the circuits on the NASCAR calendar are ovals, this not being one of them though. But the future of the Chicago street race in NASCAR is unclear, it's uncertain. Now, of course, we've got it coming up this weekend, so it may well be the case that a contract extension does get announced with NASCAR. It would not be unlike a major sporting series to do something like this. We see it in Formula 1 a lot. Obviously, the Austrian Grand Prix contract was extended with Formula 1 with, of course, that race taking place last weekend. But let's have a look at what NASCAR's saying when it comes to Chicago, and obviously the city of Chicago itself in Illinois. What are they saying about extending this race into the future? So NASCAR and Chicago signed a deal in 2022 to hold 3 races in Chicago between 2023 and 2025. The last of those, of course, coming up this weekend. Now, reportedly, there are 2 options to be able to extend the Chicago street race beyond 2025, but neither are actually set in stone just yet. Indeed, the mayor of Chicago has basically been saying, let's just enjoy 2025. Let's enjoy it for what it's worth, which again, you can take those words and those feelings one way or the other. Now, the first of these 2 options when it comes to extending the Chicago street race is actually to change what part of the year this race takes place on. Currently, right now, it's taking place around the 4th of July weekend. And that is something that the Chicago City would, of course, prefer because it would put less stress on the authorities. Obviously, the 4th of July weekend being so busy for the emergency services, getting them to also be there in force when it comes to this race as well, in addition to their regular duties, is obviously a lot to ask. So Chicago would want to move it to another point in the year. And the other option is, of course, just to keep it as it is, really, but that would be more difficult for the emergency services, and it's something that Chicago is not keen on as well. What would happen if the Chicago street race actually goes off the calendar? Well, there are rumours potentially that they could go back to the Chicagoland Speedway potentially, which I don't think is particularly likely personally. There's a reason why they left there at the end of the day. I think the much rumoured Southern Californian street race would replace it instead. San Diego have reportedly got close to making a deal with NASCAR to bring NASCAR to the streets of San Diego in 2026. That is according to The Athletic. And from what I understand as well, when it comes to NASCAR, I think they do want another street race. They don't want to get rid of street races from the calendar. They would want something to replace Chicago and be a street race. And San Diego, and apparently San Diego are the front runners for that. But yeah, guys, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about the Chicago street race? Should it stay on the calendar? Should we replace it with San Diego? Should we replace it with an oval instead? I want to hear what you have to say on this as always, guys. Like, share, comment, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and have a fantastic day wherever in the world today, and we'll see you very soon.